My name is Ann Diggory. We're here at my show at Blue Mountain Gallery, where it's called Out of Place, Shifts in Media, Location, and Content. And what I'd like to start with is a piece called Branching Out that is uses that shift in media. I find that when I'm in nature, there's a lot of energy and excitement, and by combining photography and painting and that shift between detail and expression, I get a sense of the light better. So there are sections where it's more photographic and then it spins out into painting and light and works with that way. The other part of the title being Out of Place is I don't consider these are paintings of actual places. It's out of that place I have made something. So even though it appears to be a real place, it's actually a lot of things have been shifted around and changed in order to make that expression. So if you look just a little bit to the side of this, these are more quicker studies. They're not studio works of where the light is changing. Just for only about 10 minutes does the light on a certain part and then it shifts, and I like that sense of very fast moving light. So this is called glancing light, and this is night falls. There are waterfalls at just about night where it's getting quite dark. So these are out of that place, but they're also expressing something more general than that specific location. If we go over to the there are quite a lot of little paintings that I do just to study light. They can sit on a desk. This one was called Summer Greens, which is this wonderfully artificial green boat in the middle of all these natural greens. Was kind of fun to capture. So some are quite simple paintings. This much larger one also uses the sense of photography and paint inside. This scene was a place I was paddling up in the Adirondacks of northern New York, and I had a sense of being enclosed in a beautiful light-filled space, yet in the distance was this incredibly brilliantly lit lake, and I was torn between the two spaces. I wanted to stay in this enclosed space, but I also wanted to maybe paddle ahead. So in the end, what I decided to do was to make an artwork that's about that conflict between a certain kind of gentleness and light-filledness and that sharpness of vision. So it's sort of to pull back and forth between those two. So that was kind of an exciting thing to do. So a lot of this, there's a little photography in two spots, and then the water, which is moving, is much more in terms of paint. It has a little tinge to it of an umber color, sort of like an old-fashioned artwork that sort of gives you that sense of going back in time, kind of a memory kind of thing. If we look at the other thing that I sometimes do is combine images of a landscape that was painted in another century. So this one painted on Lake George actually has, as part of the painting, a reproduction of a painting by David Johnson that's in the Albany Institute. And I visited the spot where he painted it. It looks totally different, except the mountain ranges are the same and the same point of land are there. So I actually reproduced his painting and then added my own painting in the foreground and some photography to give a sense of that contrast of contemporary, old, that when I'm at the lake I can sense both the vision of someone else had there as well as my own. A larger version that does more with that sense of detail. In this particular piece called Overture, I was transfixed by the difference between some of the very small details, like you have the small flower in the middle of just a few lily pads, and then you have this huge sky and lots of light. So you have that contrast of worlds. So I was able to combine. This is partly a reproduction of a painting I had done, but then painted over. This was a scene I had painted from my canoe. And then in Photoshop, I'm able to add in photography of this section. That gets printed on canvas, and then I keep painting on it to try to see if I can keep that energy going from one part to the other. So in the end, this is probably maybe 50–60% is repainted when the print is actually made onto the canvas. So it's a combination. It goes paint, photography, and then back up to paint again to get that sense of energy. If we go to the back wall here, this series of 6 still lifes actually are a series, there are pairs here that relate to each other. This first set, I was actually wearing this shirt and decided to wash it, and I put it into this blue pail to wash it, and then I realized the color combinations there were just too exciting. I couldn't wash it for about 2 weeks because I had to work on the painting. And what I did was actually put this painting into the background of this painting here, so the two become sort of a pair and have a conversation with each other. I added a little statue of, it's an Inuit sculpture of a whale floating in air instead of water, and I thought that was kind of nice, kind of a joke about there was no water here as well, along with my palette. The next two, although they don't have information about each other, have a very light palette. They're about the studio, about painting going on. Here there's a brush and a pencil. Something came home from the farmer's market that I wanted to paint, and I loved how it was on the blue plate, so I added a painting in the background that's what we saw previously, and this marvelous fabric that I happen to have around. So it became kind of a Matisse meets Cezanne still life of lots of light, in the same way that this is full of lots of light. These are among the more recent paintings. The other pair that's on the wall started, I had done a painting at the Grand Canyon at sunrise with the Colorado River running through it. I just loved the shape of this as things eroded, this beautiful shape coming down. And then when a friend gave me some flowers that bloomed that had that same kind of shape, that trumpet shape, and sort of that's the same green colors. This was hanging on the wall behind them, and I ended up putting the two together, having fun. This is called Grand Illusion. It's an illusion of space above the Grand Canyon. So it's a very playful sense of what is space, what is volume, flat pattern that's supposed to be space, but it's a painting, and then an object that has volume to it, but also is a painted volume. The same thing happened in the first two paintings in the show, in which I had done a landscape out in California. This is Big Sur, where the waves are flashing in, and I was interested in the swirl of color coming in. And then later, when I was working on a painting of my mother's old bedspread in a box called, I felt it was like Uncontained, I juxtaposed that same painting into it along with a drawing, so that she was from California, and so putting her things in with a representation of that space was kind of fun. So you get that swirl of things going on. What was fun about hanging the show is that it's, in sense of being out of place, they aren't hung by this is Arizona, this is California. I was really looking at shapes and color and light. So the companion piece to this still life is actually a landscape from Saranac Lake area, where you get that same swirl of light coming through. This happens to be, instead of fabric, this is a rock full of light in the woods and coming there. The same thing as we move the next one is in Arizona, in Sedona. What was amazing to me was that contrast between the massive rocks, orange, sort of artificial color, even though it's natural, and how that felt against the sky that was very gray and moving. So in the end, trying to play off that big solidity against a very open space. So thank you very much, and hope you get a chance to see the show.